Okay, so I am going to do one final response to Ken Corprew, and then we're done. Uh, Mr. Corprew has started, or has all I think he has always been arguing in very bad faith, but he started getting very personal about it, and it's if it gets personal for him, then it's going to get personal for me. So I'm going to cut this off very quickly. And I had not planned to make a video today, but I want to take care of this. Go ahead and take care of it before I do the next white fragility video. So, in the white fragility video series, I have been allowing for allowing a portion of each video to address responses from people who disagree with what I have to say, so that I can try to engage with that. And this discussion isn't that way. This discussion isn't happening in a vacuum. And so. So far, all of these have been responses to Ken Corprew, just because he's been a very prolific respondent. But there comes a point where it's like, okay, this is obviously going to go nowhere, and I am actually being made uncomfortable by this person's behavior. And so I'll explain what I'm talking about. He says, this is a response to the notion that you never stated that Dr. DiAngelo's book is inherently true. In your video, Robin DiAngelo is probably the real racist. At 2 minutes 15 seconds, you stated, quote, it's not because of the inherent truth of the book that people are having these profoundly negative reactions to it, close quote. I guess when you talk so much spit, you know the word I really mean, I guess he means shit, you tend to forget. Okay, Ken, I was not suggesting that there was any inherent truth in the book. I was suggesting that people are not reacting to inherent truth in the book because there is not inherent truth for them to react to. So, I know, I have a feeling that what your response would probably be was that was a rare moment of me being so overpowered by the deep-seated truth of the book that I'm in, somehow in passionate denial about, that the truth broke through, and somehow everything else I've said before and since is therefore completely contradicted. No, Ken. No, I know what I meant, and I think most people that heard the video know what I meant. I am on the record thinking the book is without inherent truth before, and I am on the record thinking it is without inherent truth after, so I think what actually happened here is that you engaged in quote mining. And I just do not have the desire or interest to sit here and hold your hand as I try to explain in excruciating detail things that you can't seem to pick up on. I'm generally of the opinion that if we're getting down to the point where we are having to analyze sentence structure to glean what somebody means, then there is a problem of a genuine problem of understanding with one of the people involved. And in this case, it's you. And you go on to say, I guess when you talk, you said that, we said that, what's really funny about you isn't your many contradictions, it's your lame attempt at analyzing white fragility. Okay, this is where you're going to start getting personal. And I'm not going to listen to this, I'm not going to put up with it. There's no reason for me to subject myself to this. If you will not speak in good faith, then I will not continue to engage with you. Anyway. White fragility isn't the inability to agree with Dr. DiAngelo, it's the inability of people who identify as being white to talk about white supremacy without feeling ill. You admitted this, getting angry, you again, crying, probably you after you logged off, or engaging in some other avoidance behavior. I'm sitting here talking about I'm sitting here talking about these issues without having any of these unhinged reactions you're referring to. I did have a profoundly negative reaction to the book. But that was not because it was a discussion of white supremacy. That was because it was a Kafka trap that's designed to screw with people's heads. I'm sitting here having as civil a discussion about this topic as I think I possibly could. I think as civil as anyone could reasonably be expected to have about it. And the simple reaction is, you don't agree, you're having white fragility. And the thing is, Dr. DiAngelo, this ultimately comes down to whether or not you agree with Robin DiAngelo, because, and I can't emphasize this enough, Ken, her concept of white fragility has never, ever, ever, ever been proven to exist. There is nothing to suggest that white fragility is a real concept. She saw a bunch of people have a negative reaction to what she was saying. And the most basic structural element of any kind of research would be to say, if everybody is having this negative reaction to me, what am I doing that's causing this? What's wrong with my basic premise if I'm the only common denominator? But she won't do that. She has to go the route of everybody else there must be something wrong with everybody else. And that's that is just the idea that could be the basis for any kind of academic profound academic insight is patently absurd. So that is the issue that I take with it. So he goes on and says, so let's look at the basis for Dr. DiAngelo's premise. Now, look, Ken, we're in the process of deconstructing the actual book. All of these points that you're making here are going to be addressed in depth as they come up in the book. Reiterating them over and over again is not going to change anything. And I honestly am made uncomfortable by people like this who have enough time to write epic length comments like this. Like, at some point it's got to be easier for you to just comment make your own videos about your own views. You'll be able to disseminate them better. Anyway, I'm not going to try to give you any advice. So it says, so let's look at the basis for Dr. DiAngelo's premise. The basis is that white supremacy, parentheses racism, is intimately woven into the history and culture of the USA. Okay, white supremacy is not the totality of the concept of racism. Every single ethnicity on this earth has at some point mistreated another ethnicity on the basis of their ethnic difference. It's wrong when white people do it. It's wrong when every other ethnicity does it. And believe it or not, even the bullshit goalpost shifting, extreme left interpretation of racism, where it's prejudice plus power, that's been practiced by every ethnicity at some point in human history. This is not a concept that is unique to white people, despite what Robin DiAngelo tries to say. And another profound example of her academic ineptness is the idea that you can just immediately unilaterally knock all evidence that contradicts you off the table and declare yourself to be right. That is not how this process works. And you're going to bring in this comment, you're going to start wanting my credentials. Dude, you could not write a 7th grade life science paper on the get a passing grade on a 7th grade life science paper with the kind of academic rigor that Robin DiAngelo uses. I mean, this is base level shit. This is trying to say that 2 and 2 make 5. Anyway, so he goes on, white supremacy is indeed in the DNA of the country's history and culture. The public lynchings of Emmett Till, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and countless others is as American as baseball, hot dogs, and apple pie. If you disagree with that, I strongly urge you to read the writings of, and he lists a long series of, I'm guessing the names I recognize are all black, so I'm guessing that all of these are black writers. And to that extent, I would say I can find a bunch of black writers who agree with what I have to say, and that's something we all need to stop doing, is shielding ourselves with black writers who agree with us. Just state your opinion. Anyway, these brilliant scholars collectively have been writing about race and racism in the USA for going on 3 centuries. They have copious amounts of evidence to support their conclusions. Okay, let's stop and take a step back for a minute. Nobody, at least as far as I am aware, is contradicting the idea that racism, specifically a white supremacist bent of racism, has been a long-standing historical evil in this country. The difference is that there's this weird belief, apparently, there's this weird thing that leftists do where it's like, if something bad happens, we're incapable of moving forward from it. I don't know about you, but I live in a country that has a proud history of acknowledging and moving forward from its own racism. And that has not been a one-off cut and dry, let's fix everything instantly solution. It has happened slowly and over time, and it has taken a tremendous amount of reflection and a tremendous amount of admission of wrongdoing on behalf of both public and private citizens, and a great deal of reparation in terms of addressing and acknowledging and moving forward from these things together. That is real. That is part of this country, and there's just this weird mental roadblock for people that are doing this far left social justice version of history, where it's like you can't seem to comprehend that we continue to move forward as a country. You act like somebody's saying that we live in a country that has a history of racism and that we have continued to address it and move forward as best we can and that we continue to improve. You act like that's some kind of blasphemous statement. But that's the world I live in. That's part of what I like about the United States. Because believe it or not, there are parts of the world with a deep-seated history of racism that have never addressed it at all. Good God. And I don't want to live in those places. I don't want to live in places there's places to this day that still practice slavery. Places to this day that still have apartheid-style restrictions on how ethnicities can interact with one another. These people still exist. I don't want to live in those countries. I like living in a country where if there's a problem, I can keep beating on the door of the government for that problem to be solved, because my right to a redress of grievances can never be taken away from me. You want to talk about what this country is structurally. Structurally, this country is exactly the kind of country that can stand up to racism, the kind of country that is built to respond to human injustice. And I know that seems strange. I know it's weird and contradictory, because the founders, the men who sat down and set up this the document that became the basis for this country were all slave owners. You're right about that. But you know what? These guys had a very unique, very defiant vision that men should be seen as equal. And you don't understand that people, these critics of history, of U.S. history, don't seem to understand that even just the idea that white male landowners would all be treated as equal before the bar of law, that alone was a revolutionary concept. And it laid the foundation for us to move forward. No, they did not get all the way. They didn't have all the solutions. They were not thinking in terms of, oh, we need to extend this to women, and we need to extend this to ethnic minorities, or we need to extend this to gays. Hell, they barely had a concept of what homosexuality was, let alone that it was a demographic group that they needed to acknowledge and incorporate. But they set up a foundation that allowed every oppressed group to come before the bar of law and say, we are being mistreated, our constitutional rights are being violated. And every time the government has acknowledged that and expanded the coverage of that all men are created equal concept, every time they have expanded that coverage, the coverage has gotten stronger, and the basis for those rights has gotten easier and easier to extend to other people. No, we didn't solve everything overnight. Yes, there were people that were dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century. Yes, many of them were in the government. I know that people like George Wallace and Strom Thurmond existed, but we have continued to improve and continued to overcome. And look at these people that we glorify through history. We don't glorify them because they were slave owners. There is a dissident group of people that are pro-Confederate, and those people are wrong. I am totally in favor of tearing down every Confederate monument. They have no business being here. It is as atrocious as putting up a Hitler statue in Germany. All of those things need to come down. I'm totally in favor of those coming down. And to the people who would say that, that they want to preserve those things because it's their their history and their heritage, to that extent I would say yes. So take all the statues, donate them to private ownership, and you can set up a privately owned museum to to maintain that aspect of history. But as far as the public sphere is concerned, no, all of that needs to be gone. We're not perfect. Nothing is perfect. No country, there is not a country on this earth that is functioning the way you want it to function. At the very best, we have to just take one step at a time. And this impudent, childish, response from the far left, this throwing a fit in the back seat of the car, are we there yet? That attitude is not helping. Anyway. He says, what Dr. DiAngelo brings to the mix is that she says because of white supremacy, it's difficult for whites to receive any feedback that does not support white supremacist socialization. Again, we're going to get into all of this in the actual series. There's no reason for me to try to reiterate it here, except that that's not what's happening. He goes on to say, now this is really telling. A person may disagree with Dr. DiAngelo's conclusion, but that is part of the dialogue process. In her book, she encourages dialogue, but no, she doesn't. But like she said, people should... she really does not. The nanosecond you voice a single statement in contradiction to her idea of white fragility, you're being a fragile white person. Anyway, in her book, she encourages dialogue, but like she said, people should at least become educated on this topic. You criticize... Okay, the first thing I want to say, I really don't like what you said about, you may disagree with her, but that's part of the dialogue process. That's that attitude. That's the attitude. To me, what it comes off like what you're trying to say is, the first step is admitting you have a problem. No, that's not how this works, dude. People can disagree with Robin DiAngelo and be good people. It is possible to not be racist. Despite the wacko brain cancer bullshit that the far left is injecting into this argument, it's possible to not be racist. And it is possible to hold the position that racism is not beneficial to anybody, which is my position. So he goes on to say, blah, blah, blah. You criticize Dr. DiAngelo because she has a PhD. No, I don't criticize her because she has a PhD. I say that the fact that she has a PhD does not make her inherently right. You keep using the argument from authority fallacy. Okay, so we've got quote mining, shifting the goalpost, argument from authority fallacy, begging the question. I mean, you just every logical contradiction you hit over and over again. What are your credentials? Where have you been published? What are your scholarly articles? The aforementioned scholars, including Dr. DiAngelo, have spent decades studying this issue and have very informed opinions. No, they don't! That is where the other scholars you mentioned may have informed opinions on their topics, but this white fragility thing is made up. It is solely on the basis of Robin DiAngelo saying, everybody has a negative reaction to what I say. The problem must be with them, not me. Anecdotal evidence is what you criticize Dr. DiAngelo for using. She uses both anecdotal evidence and data. But so far, all you have shown is... No, she doesn't. She does not have data to support the notion that white fragility exists. But so far, all you have shown is anecdotal, and even that is suspect. Why? Why is my anecdotal evidence suspect? Because you just don't want to entertain the possibility that I'm right. But more so, the thing is, this is your problem. You are not, in any kind of analysis, you are not required to prove a negative. Dr. DiAngelo is presenting the idea that this notion... Robin DiAngelo is presenting the idea that this notion of white fragility exists. The onus is on her to prove that it exists. It's not on me to prove that it doesn't exist. Once again, argument from authority fallacy. Opinions are like mentally ill coworkers, neighbors, relatives. We all have at least one. Having a mentally ill cousin does not qualify you to be a psychiatrist. Just because you have a strong opinion about Dr. DiAngelo's work does not mean you are well informed. Even though she clearly explains in great detail what white fragility is, you either try to redefine it or you just don't get it. See, that's the thing, Ken. You're not capable of entertaining the possibility that she's wrong. By by engaging with what she has to say, I am by default entertaining the possibility that she might be right. And I know when I say that, what you're going to do is say, see, you acknowledge that there's even a possibility that she might be right. Ken, there's a possibility that there's a teacup orbiting Saturn right now. I mean, that doesn't mean, the possibility doesn't mean that there's an inherent truth to it or that it's highly likely or anything like that. You can't you are incapable of entertaining the idea that she's wrong. Every time you come down to the idea that either I'm avoiding the issue or obfuscating it, and or don't understand it. And Ken, that's the mindset of somebody who is indoctrinated. You are not operating off of any kind of clear thinking rationale. You have been indoctrinated into the way of thinking that this woman wants you to have. You're not capable of entertaining the idea that she's wrong. That's why you keep coming back to logical fallacies, bringing up her academic credentials as if it's some kind of shield against criticism from anybody that's of lesser academic standing. That's the behavior of somebody who is insulating themselves. Attacking, and that's another thing, is ad hominem attacks. Using an ad hominem attack against somebody, accusing anybody that disagrees of being guilty of exhibiting the thing that you are proposing they disagree with. These are all logical fallacies. So we're not going to do this anymore. I will not. I'm done engaging with your comments. And to everybody else, I hope that makes it very clear why. And one thing, people keep coming up and saying, it's so great you're doing videos again and all of this. And one of the things that really makes me back off of wanting to do videos, of doing any kind of commentary, is having to deal with people like this. I mean, y'all who are reading this from a third-party perspective, or a third-person perspective, you can't imagine how fucking aggravating it is to deal with people like this on the reg. Anyway, hopefully that was informative.